Everyone, welcome to the webinar. We're just going to give people a minute to join. My name is Angus Pryor. You know what? Let's get that chat working. I've done quite a few of these Centaur webinars, and I find attendees are generally very good chatters. So would you mind just putting into the chat? And I think I don't know, it's not the big secret, just where you're tuning in from. Maybe just put the town or the city or whatever, put that into the chat. I just want to make sure this is coming through okay. Farm, okay. Well, that's in Adelaide, I think. I must admit, I actually lived in Adelaide for 6 years, and trying to remember exactly where Ingle Farm is. I feel like it's on the north side. And I admit I'm looking at the spelling of your name going, I'm not quite sure what to do with NGA. But thank you. And Abdul, who's in Brisbane, that's the city of my birth. Just for everyone else, just type into the chat where you're tuning in from. It's always fun to see where people are at. We'll give people a couple of minutes to join. I'm in Victoria. Sydney, well done, Kath. Yes, that narrows it down to about 5 million people. Good. Come on, everyone else. Type into the chat. Where are you tuning in from? I can see the attendees here. Okay, that's good. Well, Davey, I was talking to you yesterday, so I know where Davey is. He's in Melbourne. So I don't need anyone to give away their state secrets. It's just always fun to know where people are tuning in from. And let's do a bit of while you're telling me where you are, I'm also curious to know what it's like. Abdul, you're in Brisbane, I assume. Hey, Holly. Holly's in Perth. What's it like in Perth today, Holly? What's it like in Brisbane, Abdul? And I want to say Ngah, but I really don't know how to pronounce NGA. I apologise. What's it like in Adelaide? Tamina's in Melbourne. Now, Tamina, I spent the last 2 days in Melbourne and it was not too bad. Abdul says it's beautiful. Isn't that what they say about Queensland? Perfect one day, beautiful one day, perfect the next or something. It's pronounced nah, like yeah, nah. Okay, thank you. I've just never seen that spelling before. Yes, okay, Abdul's here recommending we all move to Queensland. Good. Oh, all right. What's it like in South Australia now? We're hearing it's beautiful. Holly, tell us about Perth. I can tell I'm currently I live in Ballarat, and Ballarat is absolutely flipping freezing. I have a new book that I picked up from the post office, and my goodness, it was so cold. Nah says a little bit of sun. Yes, my wife and my daughter in Adelaide at the minute. I've got a grandchild due any day now. It's my birthday next week, and I'm hoping that she turns up when it's my birthday. All right, well, I suggest we get going. Can you just, while we're chatting, can you just confirm you can see my screen okay? You don't have a lead problem, you have a conversion problem? Just put a yes into the chat if you can see that. Okay, that's great. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Let's get going. You don't have a lead problem, you've got a conversion problem. Hi, everyone. My name's Angus Pryor. I'm the CEO of Dental Growth Solutions and Dental Stars. Let's get going. So the purpose of this session is to unpack some changes in dentistry that's impacting patient numbers. You know, we're talking about leads and conversion and so on, but of course, all of this is really about patient numbers. Identifying some simple changes that you can make today. I'm a very practical person. I'm not going to be speaking too much theory, and help you create a roadmap for 20% growth in the next 12 months. The agenda is pretty simple, a background, then I'm going to do 2026 marketing unpacked. Like, what's it like to be marketing a dental practice in 2026? We're going to talk about the unintended bottleneck, and then I'm going to show you an easier way. Like, we've developed something called the Practice Uplift Plan, And I'm going to show you the exact framework that we use inside that, that you'll be able to use yourself and diagnose these bottlenecks across 100 data points. It's about taking the guesswork out of growing. But the key, my friends, is to take action now. I'm going to get you to type that into the chat, please. Would you mind? Take action now. We need to train our brains to go, not just I'm here for a bit of fun or entertainment or whatever, but actually what's something I can implement? Type that into the chat. Would you mind? Take action now. Thanks, Kath. We're telling our brain, take action now. It's like putting our little antenna up, looking for something. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. I love it when you guys play hard. So, in a spirit of finding out who you are, so I can do a better job today, can you please type into the chat a number? 1, 2, 3, or 4. If you're a practice manager, you can put a 3. If you're the owner, you can put a 1. Holly's put a 4. Holly, would you care to tell me what your other is, please, for the rest of you? If you're a principal, put a 1. If you're an associate, put a 2. If you're a practice manager, put a 3. Diana's a 4 as well. Diana and Holly, would you guys mind telling me what the front office manager? Very important person. Holly says receptionist. Yes, okay, good. Tarmina's a 3. All right, that's great. Thank you. Let's keep going. So look, as for me, I've been working with dentists for the past probably 15 years now, to be honest, with my business Dental Growth Solutions. And our focus historically has always been about helping new leads come into practices and help to have you with a full chair. That's the name of the series, and we've done it well. Like, we're one of the most awarded, most respected practice growth partners around. So hopefully that gives you some confidence about the content that we're covering today. Now, what I wanted to tell you about as part of the background is what is going on in Australia. I don't think we've got anyone from New Zealand. If you do, please let me know. And I'm calling this Growth Wars, Australian population versus dentists. So on the left here, we've got Australia. On the right here, we've got dentists. And you'll see this is about in the last 10 years. And the number of practicing dentists in Australia has grown 2.5 times faster than the population's grown, okay? If you imagine this number here represents the number of practicing dentists in 2013, then I can tell you, fast forward to 2026, there is an extra 10,000 dentists practicing in Australia. Now, some of you have told me where you are. In metropolitan areas, many of you are going to be feeling this. If you're in a sort of remote area, well, maybe you won't. And so what this means in 2026 is, unfortunately, fewer new patients. It's just straight maths. It's like, the number of potential patients is just growing slightly. The number of dentists has grown a lot more. Divide one by the other, it means a lower number if it's done on average. It also means poor patient retention. Believe it or not, 2025 was the highest amount of money ever spent on dental marketing in Australian history. So when your patient leaves the practice, they are literally being bombarded by messages from other practices. The other consequence, I suppose, is if your practice doesn't do something different, then unfortunately it just becomes, a less enjoyable place to work. Staff retention maybe not as good. Let's face it, nobody wants to work in a sinking ship. And of course, for the practice owners, and we've got some practice owners on the call, then it means declining revenue and lower profitability. And finally, lifestyle adjustments, which nobody really likes. And then if some of you are thinking, oh, that's fine, I'm going to sell up for a bomb. The reality is, if your profit is going down, if your revenue is going down in absolute terms, then it means it's harder to sell the practice. So that's the bad news if we don't do something different. Now, the good news is that most practices are already sitting on the next 20% of growth. They just haven't identified where. So that is good news. And in my experience, that's absolutely the case. And so it's not that you need more ideas, you just need clarity on what to do next. So let me ask you some questions so I can help tailor my response. So would you mind just typing a number into the chat? How many active chairs have you got? I'm not talking about a room that's plumbed where you don't have a chair, but where you've actually got, yeah, okay, so I can see we've got, and this is not a competition, you know, like it is what it is. Just always curious to see, yeah. So there's a bit of a mix. I'm trying to give you a sense of an average. Sounds like the average is probably between 2 and 3. Now, we're here to look at full chairs. That's the bottom line here. And so, you know, maybe if you've got 2 chairs that are reasonably full, maybe the practice is doing about $1 million in revenue a year. That's $83,000 a month. But if you could grow that by 20%, then you take that 1 million up to 1.2 and you get that monthly up to 100,000. I'm just trying to get a sense of the magnitude of what is available to dental practices. So what you're about to hear, and I'm going to go into a lot more detail, is based on my work all over Australia and internationally for the past 15 plus years. I have worked, if it's not hundreds of dental practices, I've worked with thousands of them. I've done more than 10,000 hours of consulting with dentists in Australia and internationally, and different types of practices. You know, sometimes I'm saying stuff to people and they're like, oh yeah, but Angus, we're different. And I'm like I've worked with big practices, with small practices, city practices, country practices, specialist practices, non-specialist, corporate, non-corporate. And, you know, there are a lot of very common themes, even if you feel like you've got a unicorn, and who knows, maybe you do. And then finally, I've worked with different economic conditions. And so what I'm about to show you is on the basis of practical experience. This is not kind of textbook theories. And what you won't be hearing is all the things that we've tried that don't work. So let's have a look. 2026 Marketing Unpacked. Now, I thought what I would do is just to sort of open things up, talk about, because the name of the webinar is you don't have a lead problem, you've got a conversion problem, which begs the question, what's a lead? Would you mind typing into the chat, when you hear lead and you're thinking your practice, what are you thinking about? What would you call a lead? It's something that a potential patient does to reach out. Come on, if it's an inquiry at your practice. So, but what, like, how do they put their hand up? Probably I didn't ask that question properly, because there are a number of different ways they can put their hand up and go, oh. Yes, they're potential patients. That's true, they are potential. But what is it that they do that lets you know that they're a potential patient? I'll give you a hint. One of them is they call you on the phone. You know, they call you. What are other ways that potential patients put their hand up to go, I might be interested? They might do it over email. That's correct. Diana says walk-ins. That's true. What else? Click on a link from Google, maybe fill in a form on the website. Yes, good. All right. So I apologize. I didn't explain it brilliantly at the beginning, but you're getting the idea. Message on social media. Yeah, absolutely. Phone call, they might drop in, maybe it's a comment on a social media post, maybe they complete an online form. That could be on your website, it could be responding to an ad in Meta, something like that. Anyway, I think you get the idea. So that's what a lead is. They've said, I'm interested. Haven't said I want to become a patient necessarily, just that I'm interested. And then the question is, what is a conversion? It's about getting someone to do something. Now, examples would be turning an inquiry into an appointment. We've listed all of those potential patients, but it's actually getting that inquiry turned into an appointment. It's turning a treatment plan into treatment, you know, like it's just an idea. It's like, hey, Angus, you know, here's some things you can do, but it's only when I actually do the treatment that the conversion has happened. And then finally, a one-off visitor into a loyal patient. And I know that unfortunately, you know, for all of us in business at times, and I'd say dentistry would be a real obvious one. It's like, I've got a toothache, I come into your practice, like if you're on this call, I come into your practice and I visit once and and you say to me, well, Angus, we've got you out of pain, and by the way, you should be doing something more regular, and you go, yep, thanks very much, but I don't convert from a one-off visitor to a loyal patient. So that's what we're talking about. People putting their hand up, how do we get them to convert? All right, question. Anybody know what the common name for these guys is together? Don't say animals. I will just tell you, you can type it into the chat while you're thinking, oh, well done, Abdul, like, pow, straight on the money. These are known as the Big Five. Wow, Abdul, that's amazing. And so, look, a few years ago, my wife and I went to South Africa, and we got to go to one of the national parks. And there's lots of different animals in the national parks, but these guys are known as the Big Five. And in answer to your question, we got to see 4 of them. The leopard, they're pretty hard to find. They're kind of up a tree somewhere. Now, why am I telling you about the Big Five? Because for you, in your efforts of having full chairs, we're going to talk about the Big Six. And it's got nothing to do with those animals. These are the 6 things that need to work together for your chairs to be full. And this is part of a series, this webinar. I'm going to be doing another one in 2 weeks' time and another one in 2 weeks' time. But for today, we're going to focus mainly on attraction and conversion. That's attraction, that's leads, getting people to put their hand up. Conversion, getting those leads, turning them into appointments. So when attraction's going well, and you can see that, we've got a couple of state dinners there, and, not just because someone's put their hand up doesn't mean that we've managed to get them, converted. The one on the left looks pretty crap. The one on the right looks pretty nice, doesn't it? Well, it does to me. So when attraction's not going well, then practices have got no understanding of who their ideal patients are. They have a message which is what I call undifferentiated. It means you haven't given people a reason to choose you compared to other practices. Like, if I'm honest, a lot of marketing that I see done by dentists, it's kind of like, hey, we're dentists and we do things that dentists do. And, the person looking at this is thinking to themselves subconsciously, like, no kidding, Batman. That's what you get to be a dentist. And so what that generates, among other things, is a haphazard flow of new patients. But when the attraction side's going well, there's a consistent message. You've figured out what it is that your existing patients love about your practice. You've figured out that message, and you're consistently producing content with the same message over time. And what that tends to generate is a steady flow of motivated new patients because they connect with that. So that's the sort of lead process. But there's plenty of companies like mine that do this. But my point is simply this, like, maybe marketing and patient attraction is not the problem. Some of you are thinking, oh, Angus, we just need more new patients. And, like, if you just open up the practice, I'd say, absolutely true. But for many of you, it may not be that the marketing and patient attraction is the problem. Instead, you might have not an attraction problem, but a conversion problem. And I'm just showing you some examples here. Like, many practices have got hundreds of unconverted leads, and you're thinking, what are you talking about? Well, I'm going to show you some evidence of that. I know many practices have got literally thousands of recalls and reactivations on their books. We work through Dental Stars, which is a team of remote support, and they get on the phone and call practices. I know, call patients. We've come across a practice that had a recall list of 16,000 that had never been touched by a human being. I mean, maybe the odd text message or email, but never actually a human being picking up the phone. And I know from Centaur data that most established practices have got literally between $500,000 and $1 million worth of incomplete treatment on their books. And so as much as we're thinking, hey, Angus, I just want more new patients, and I'm not saying you shouldn't get them, but in many cases, the issue is that you've got a conversion problem. And you can see the results of that here. No wonder he's not looking too happy. So the unintended bottleneck But first, I thought a brief commercial break. Firstly, I wanted to say thank you very much to Centaur for putting on these webinars. And there's some things that are Dental for Web is sponsoring this webinar. So landing in August, September 2026. So that's next month. The D4W web appointment book, refreshed and faster. Let's face it, everybody wants fast, especially online. If things are not going quickly online, people will go elsewhere. The next thing is they've got some built-in business analytics, which means that your practice data it's visual and it's much easier to see. This stuff as an owner is really, really helpful. Or a practice manager. I know we've got a bunch of practice managers on the call. And then smart attendance predictions, which is basically where they can start to look at your appointment book and go, hey, this one's a bit of a, just keep an eye on this one. Maybe you can do something more proactive. Anyway, so thanks to Dental for Web, that's some things that's coming. The other thing I wanted to mention is, now this is regional, and most of you are in the big cities, which is where most of Australia lives. But as I mentioned at the beginning, I've got a new book, which has literally just arrived from the printers today. And if you are in one of these locations, or you can get to one of these locations, that's the QR code there. We've got it's like a mini ADX. There'll be some suppliers, there'll be food and drink and so on, and there's a number of trade displays, and I'll do a keynote about the book. Anyway, so if you're in one of these spots, the truth is you will be looking at this going, wow, nobody ever comes to these places. And we're like, we know, that's why we're coming. So anyway, the Stuff Practice Roadshow. If you know someone in one of those spots, take a photo, send them the details, because it'll be a great night, a great free event. All right, let's keep going. The unintended bottleneck. So we're trying to get full chairs at your practice. And what I see happening is practices will occasionally go pretty hard on leads, but we need some other things, as we've discussed. It's not enough just to have leads. We need a response to those leads, and then we need to have conversion. And you might think that what I'm speaking about is stating the bleeding obvious, and I would have thought that too, until I saw the data. So I'm just going to say that again. It's not enough just to have leads. We need conversions, but between leads and conversions, we need a response in the middle. You're thinking, what are you talking about, Angus? Well, one way that you respond would be to answer the phone. Now here is this is some results from, this was last year in Sydney, but I have seen this data repeat itself again and again and again. So this is based on literally hundreds of calls to practices in Sydney during regular business hours, just on a regular day of the week. And I can tell you, this was several hundred calls, that 41% of practices did not answer their phone. In other words, you've done a great job, whether it's great word of mouth, or you've been doing some marketing. Maybe you've done those things that I said you need to do to get people to call, but unfortunately, a big chunk of practices are simply not answering their phone. And some of you are thinking, oh, but that's fine, we've got voicemail, to which I would say to you, and I'm sure your own experience bears this out, in many cases, you call people back, you will never get them back. If someone's sitting here on their smartphone, they've done a Google search or an AI search or whatever, and they go, oh, okay, well, these guys look all right, I'll give them a call, and you don't answer, like, that's it. That is your one and only chance, because they go, oh, all right, well, I don't know what's going on there. Let's go down to the next one. Even in some cases where it's a word of mouth. So this is why I've done something, look, with a little bit of help from Centaur, and Kath and I have got a buddy who used to be in the spy business. We've actually hacked into the phones at all of your practices. I hope you don't mind. And I've changed the ringtone on all of your phones. $2,000 is ringing, answer me. Now, of course, I'm being a bit flippant, but I can tell you that The median spend per patient per year in Australia is about $500. And the median length of time that they will hang with your practice is about 4 years. Some people come once, never come back. Some people will be with you for decades. 4 times $500, lifetime value for each new patient is about $2,000. In fact, that's conservative. I've seen some numbers talking about $3,000 to $4,000. If your practice is doing some high-end stuff, that could be much, much higher. Like, I'd like to change the ringtone on your phone. $2,000 is ringing, answer me. And so many practices have got a real conversion problem here. They go, it's just the phone, what is it? And yet you answer that call and get the patient booked in. It can make a huge difference. All right, the next one about conversion. Now, we've spoken about some of the other ways that people will put their hand up, whether they put a comment on a social media post, maybe you're running some meta ads and they fill in a form, maybe they've been to your website and they fill in a form. Question for you. What do you reckon, just because they put their hand up at that moment, what do you reckon your chances are of getting in touch with them if you contact them within 5 minutes versus 30 minutes? So let's say we'll all agree that if you contact them within 5 minutes, you've probably got a better chance of getting to talk to them than if you contact them within 30 minutes. My question for you is this, and this is data from HubSpot. These guys are experts in CRMs, etc. Just type into the chat. If you think it's twice as likely that you will speak to them if you contact them within 5 minutes versus 30 minutes from when they put their hand up, if you think it's twice as likely, put a 2 in the chat. If you think, it's probably 3 times more likely that I'm going to speak to them if I contact them within 5 minutes, maybe you think it's 10 times. Like, what do you think that number is? How much more likely is it that I will get in touch with them if I contact them within 5 minutes versus 30 minutes? I'll just leave a second for some people to, I think everyone gets the concept. I can see some numbers coming through. Is it 2 times more likely, 5 times more likely, 10 times more likely? Just have a guess. You never know. All right, well, this is data from HubSpot, and this is based on hundreds of thousands of data points. 100 times more likely. Like, to be honest, if you're running, for example, meta ads, you should have something on your computer. You should have flashing lights, something that says, someone's just filled in a form, drop everything and contact them. Now, if I'm honest, between 5 minutes and 30 minutes, but you know what it's like. You're sitting there flicking through social media, you see something, at the moment, we need a new driveway. I've filled in a few forms. I wouldn't mind what do you call those things? Like a skylight, like a solar skylight. And I filled in a few of those forms. In many cases, I don't hear back for 1 or 2 days. And I'm like, you're dead to me. I'm not thinking about it anymore. So when someone fills in one of those forms, we've got to absolutely leap on that, because as you can see, this data from HubSpot, the risk is you will never get to speak to them, even though, your good reputation, your good word of mouth, the money you've spent on ads has generated that lead, but unfortunately we failed to convert. So what we need is a response to the leads, and that means A, doing it very quickly, and in the case of the phone, making sure you pick up the phone. The next part is about conversion. Now, we've spoken about what conversion is. I'm aware there are some people who are joining the webinar a little bit later. It's the idea of turning a potential patient into an actual patient. And so what can happen is, remember the big 6, we do lots of work at our practice on attraction, but unfortunately, we don't give much focus on conversion. In my experience, most practices have got no idea what their conversion percentage is. Like most practice owners, when I say, well, what percentage of calls from potential patients do you actually get to book an appointment? And they're like, I don't know. Oh, it's pretty good. Well, to be honest, we've got to start tracking this, because what can happen is you do a world-class job of attraction. You get Justin Bieber to write a song about your practice and it's #1 globally and the phone's ringing off the hook and you're thinking, wow, winner, chicken dinner. But then unfortunately, you've got feral Cheryl answering the phone. Now, I'm aware some of the people on this call are receptionists. I'm not accusing anyone of being feral Cheryl, but I'm telling you, this kind of reality happens all the time. Yes, check. Cheryl has picked up the phone. She's responded to the lead. But that, my friends, is not enough. What we need to do is to convert that lead. And the truth is, leads can be lost in 90 seconds. Someone calls up the practice, and if you've got someone, to be honest, who doesn't know what they're doing on the phones, then they can lose someone very, very quickly, even though Justin Bieber's written a song about you. Taylor Swift and Justin Bieber have done a duet, together about you. The leads can be lost in just 90 seconds, even if you've got world-class marketing happening. So here's 3 things you need to do, and you've got 90 seconds. I'm not joking. #1, build rapport. Now, I just need to tell you, I personally have listened to the recordings of calls coming into practice hundreds and hundreds of times. And some of you are thinking, Angus, but we do this. And I've got to tell you, if you are, well done, because most practices aren't doing any of this. And what's happened is, just to give you a little bit of background, is in the 90s, when there were the number of dentists per the population was not that high, you didn't need to do any of this stuff, because where else were they going to go? But when we've got an extra 10,000 dentists out there, suddenly we need to get this stuff working. So step 1, build rapport. All right, question into the chat. Fastest, easiest, simplest way to build rapport. It's not complex. What is it? Type it into the chat. If your job was to build rapport with someone, what's one thing you could do? Super simple. Oh, Holly, you are my new favorite person. Ask their name and use their name. So Na and Holly are on the money. Yeah, ask for their name. I've listened to so many recordings where the whole conversation happens and the person on the other end of the phone has never once said, oh, sorry, who am I speaking to? So ask their name and use it. Now, look, may I suggest use it sparingly. I have heard people go, hey, Angus, I hope you're having a great day, Angus. Thanks for calling, Angus. I'm just letting you know, Angus, well, obviously that's overusing it, but just, try to use it at least twice in the first 10 seconds because it will plug in here. Otherwise, write it down. If we use their name twice in the first 10 seconds, we'll remember it. If we don't, you're sitting there going, oh, was it Mary or was it Martha? You ever had that before? You meet someone socially, same deal. So build rapport, use their name, empathize with them. They've got a medical reason for calling the practice. Find out what it is and empathize. Oh, that must be painful. I'm sorry to hear that. How long has it been like that? You've got 90 seconds. Next thing is give the patient a reason to choose you. Now, all of us want to make a good decision. And the truth is there's so many dentists around, and most dentists, at least from a patient point of view, are doing the same things. Do you do, extractions? Do you do root canal? Do you do fillings? Can you get me out of pain? Yes, yes, yes. Give the patient a reason to choose you. You've called the right practice, find out what their problem is. Well, that's great news because Dr. Angus is an expert at that. And guess what? He's a dentist. He is an expert. And then finally, and in some ways, this is the simplest of the lot. And I'm just going to be honest with you. It'd be lucky to find one practice in 10 that actually asks for the appointment. And that's because that's not been our background. It's not been the history. That's not the way that we had to do things in the past. But now it's much more like I have literally heard conversations, 5-minute chat between two people. Oh, tell us about this condition. Oh, well, we use this and we do that and blah, blah, blah. It just keeps going and going. And never once in the conversation do they say, hey, why don't we get you booked in to see Dr. Angus? And yet, so this is a critical part of the conversion process. It's such a simple thing to say. You don't have to say, do you want to book an appointment? That's a bit, that's a bit blunt. You can just say, look, why don't we get you booked in to see Dr. Angus? And then you can find out, exactly what's needed for you. And then before they even answer, give them a choice of two. Is morning or afternoon better for you? And guess what? The answer to both of those questions, it's a yes or a yes. So, oh, look, all right. Well, thanks so much for calling, Betty or whatever. A friend of mine always uses Betty in examples. Thanks so much for calling, Betty. Why don't we get you booked in? Is morning or afternoon better for you? And for most people, if you've built some rapport, given the patient a reason to choose you, all of this can be done in 90 seconds. Then when you offer the appointment, most people will book it in. And yet a lot of practices, they just don't do any of those, and unfortunately they fail in conversion. Now, having said that, maybe you don't have a lead problem, and maybe you don't have a conversion problem. Maybe what you've got is a diagnosis problem. Because as I mentioned, I've got the big six, and I'm going to be expanding on these in the subsequent webinars. But one of the things that can happen is we're thinking, I want full chairs. But if you put your attention on fixing the wrong bottleneck, it actually can waste you 12 months. Look, the lead-in conversion is really important. Let's do some maths. Let's imagine that your practice misses one new patient a day because the phone isn't answered or you don't get on to them quickly. To give you an idea of the impact on that value, that's just one a day. Potential patient calls you or reaches out to you and you don't do a good job of converting that. That adds up to, believe it or not, $500,000 in lifetime value every year. So you might think it sounds like such a simple thing to do, and yet the impact is, extraordinary. And like many practices, that would be the tip of the iceberg. All right, so let's remind ourselves about the big six. We've spoken a bit about attraction and conversion, but of course there's patient experience, patient communication, follow-up, culture and leadership. And as you'll see, sometimes what happens is you think you've got some of these nailed, but in fact, as you can see, these guys have got good practice growth and team goals, blah, blah, blah. But I'm going to say the body language here suggests that one of these six is probably not working that well. And yet, when you can get this stuff right, this is Dr. Brian Chen. And in his case, it was around attraction. That was what they needed to focus on. And as he said, they've grown 30% in the last year. That was working with us. This was Dr. Johan Thomas. Since we've been helping him, we've grown by 46% in less than 2 years, focusing on attraction and conversion. Are you getting the sense? Like, these fixes are not one size fits all. It just depends on the practice. Dr. Jeff Hall, honestly, it's the best money I've ever spent because it's all about return on investment. And so, in this case, it was around patient communications and follow. Is that making sense? So there's, as I say, in my experience, there's 6 things that practices need to focus on to get the chairs full. Now, today we've spoken mainly about attraction and conversion. The premise of this webinar is that maybe you don't have an attraction problem, maybe it's a conversion problem, and I've shown you some evidence of some of that. So with that in mind, I wanted to talk to you about an easier way. The truth is I've done marketing for hundreds, if not thousands of practices, and the one thing that's really confused me is how is it I can do the same marketing and yet get a different outcome? Same marketing in 2 different practices, but get a different outcome. I just out of curiosity, type into the chat why you think that can happen. How is it possible to have exactly the same marketing at 2 practices, but have quite different outcomes? Would you mind typing that into the chat for a sec? Why do you think that's happening? Timing? Okay, Nah thinks it could be timing. Any other thoughts? Maybe I've asked a hard question because I notice I'm not getting many answers here. How is it possible to have the same marketing and get different answers? Improvement on communication may be required, Diana. You're absolutely right. There's so many different things. And so, the truth is that most dental practices don't actually know what their biggest growth constraint is, which means that, maybe the marketing's working well, but the conversion's not going well. Maybe their patient communication's bad. Maybe their, the patient experience is bad. And so, where your practice is growing, it's often that it's sort of kind of by chance, not by design. It's kind of you've done it through luck rather than because you've designed. And so what can happen? I know I speak to lots of owners. I've been in Melbourne the last 2 days. I've spoken to probably 20 practices during that time, and we've, and that's a microcosm of what I've done over my career. And teams can seem busy, but the profits stagnate, particularly with all this competition. Now, we've spoken about missed calls and recalls is another one. I haven't really spoken about that in much detail. I'm going to focus more in some subsequent webinars. And then, of course, these sort of record levels of competition. And so it's kind of like, Angus, I want full chairs at my practice. But in some ways, the biggest risk with this is not actually doing nothing. It's spending the next 12 months focusing on the wrong thing. So why do growth efforts fail? Now, Nah and Diana had a crack at that. It could be more marketing when the conversion is broken, and we've looked at some examples of it. Maybe you've got, I hope not, but maybe you've got feral Cheryl answering the phone at your practice. Maybe, you're focusing on better communication, but your follow-up's not happening. I don't want to go too far into recall because I'm talking about this at a subsequent webinar, but, I've spoken to practices where it's literally like, oh, well, the patient will just get in touch when they're ready for the next appointment. Maybe it's, oh, we think we've got a staffing problem when really it's leadership that's broken. And the truth is the problem isn't really effort. The problem is solving the wrong problem. And so, I kind of forced myself to sit down earlier this year, and I've really been grappling with this problem for some time. And we came up with this thing called the Practice Uplift Plan, which is, it's about identifying your biggest constraint and building a 12-month roadmap around it. It's like that kind of one thing that's stopping the next 20% growth. I would say for many of you at your practice, this graph here is probably on the money. Let's face it, you're on this call. So you've got growth on the left-handed axis, you've got time across here, and initially lots of growth, and then things can sort of flatten out. And what the Practice Uplift Plan does is it helps you discover exactly where your growth is blocked. And I want to say to you, see, it was interesting. When I asked you what the reason was, I didn't get a response from many of you because it's not obvious. And so what this does is it benchmarks your practice against the industry. Sometimes it's hard to know what normal is. Help you identify the quick wins that your practice is missing out on. Understand your true local competitiveness. I mentioned same marketing, different result. This could be the reason. Maybe you've got that. And importantly, what it maps out is clear steps to grow by 20% in the next 12 months. Because unless your practice is brand new, in my experience, most practices have within them the capacity to grow by 20% in the next 12 months without having to spend a bomb on marketing. So the purpose of the Practice Uplift Plan isn't to give you another marketing plan. That's not the idea at all. It's to stop you wasting the next 12 months trying to fix the wrong problem. Because at the end of this, you'll know exactly where the growth is coming from, and importantly, what to ignore. So it includes some practice growth analysis, industry benchmark comparison, that's really important, patient attractiveness assessment. That's where we look through the eyes of the potential patient at your practice and see what do they see. There's a systems review across 6 key areas and a 12-month strategic growth roadmap. We just know that, you know, if I'm honest with you, when people try to do this themselves, the risk is that they've got their ladder up against the wrong wall. And what this gives you is this custom plan for 20% growth in the next 12 months. Now, the truth is you could get some dental coaching for this. You know, many of these programs, maybe they're starting $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month. And after a few months, then you could probably figure out what is that number one growth blocker, you know, rather than focusing on the wrong thing. And so before I give you a chance to, if you're interested in getting one of these, I wanted to, we're really keen to make it as easy as possible for you. I appreciate the fact that you guys are on this webinar. So it is a custom plan for your practice. I need to be super clear about this. This is nothing cookie cutter. This is something I personally look at. It's based on more than 100 data points. It's like your data. We get you to fill in a survey. We do a whole bunch of research. We've got a whole bunch of intellectual property. It'll show you the key constraints stopping you from growing by 20% in the next 12 months. Like, as much as there's all this extra competition, the truth is some practices are growing. And it's just a matter of making sure that you're focusing on the right things and avoid wasting 12 months fixing the wrong problem. You know, in my experience, look, you know, these gray hairs, guys, I'm a straight shooter. I'm just going to tell you what I see. In my experience, when dentists try to fix this themselves, they almost always pick the wrong bottleneck. They often, what they'll try to fix is the thing they're comfortable with, not the thing that's actually costing them money. The dentists that get the 20% growth, you know, in those 6 areas, the big 6, the question that they're asking is like, you know, right now in my practice with my team and my location, what is the thing that's holding us back? Because it is not one size fits all. And that's what I built this practice uplift plan to answer. So as I said, you know, your investment, if you were to get a consultant or whatever, that would be sort of the thing that you'd be looking at. Well, what we thought is we'd do, well, look, we'll actually let you see it for your practice, and you either love it or you get a full refund. So that's the good news. The bad news is I can only do 3 of these in the rest of July, partly because I've got another webinar tonight, partly because we've got this roadshow starting next week, and partly because I personally look at all of these. Anyway, so that's the practice uplift plan. So to my way of thinking, you've got 2 choices. Like if you're saying, Angus, the chairs at our practice are not full, and we've been banging our head against a brick wall trying to figure out how to do that. Like in my mind, you've got one of 2 choices, which is you either hope that you pick the right bottleneck, or alternatively, over the next couple of weeks, we'll work with you to produce one of these plans and you find out exactly where your next 20% of growth is hiding. That's what it's designed to do. Yeah, so you can sort of, at least in regard to this, you just do nothing and maybe you hope you pick the right bottleneck. Alternatively, you get one of these things, you get to look at it, and if you don't like it, if you think we've wasted your time, then it's a full refund. But the most likely outcome is you'll discover exactly what your biggest growth constraint is and exactly what are the next steps to do. And if we go back to our numbers at the start of the presentation, you know, if you've got a 2-chair practice that's doing, say, $1 million a year, like that 20% growth is like $200,000 value added. It really does make a big difference. So with that in mind, because we've had a long association with Centre, we've got a special here, which is $497. And so the way that it works is if you scan that QR code, we'll get your details. We'll get you to fill in a survey. It takes about 10 minutes. We're going to do a whole stack of research. Then we combine that all with our intellectual property. And then we'll sit down with you and take you through it and show you what the biggest growth constraint is at your practice, so you don't spend the next 12 months sort of working on the wrong thing. Anyway, that's the offer. As I said, unfortunately, I can only do 3 of those in July. It's not some false scarcity. If you saw my schedule for the next month, and also I look at these all personally. Anyway, hopefully that just gives you a sense of the kind of bigger picture. All right, let's recap then. So background, we know that dentistry is tight in Australia. an extra 10,000 dentists versus, a bit over 10 years ago. For 2026 marketing, there's kind of a right way and a wrong way to do it. But as I'm saying, one of the keys here is this unintended bottleneck in relation to conversion. Most practices have got hundreds of leads that never get responded to, and certainly not in a quick time frame. Thousands of patients that are on a recall reactivation list that have never been touched by a human. They send a text or an email. And then thirdly, Centaur data says that most practices have between $500,000 and $1 million of incomplete treatment on their books, which has just never been followed up. Like, as I said, yes, there's some competition. Yes, we're going to have to do some things differently. But yes, unless your practice is brand new, you've got 20% of growth just sitting there. It's just a matter of figuring out what is the right thing to focus on. All right, so how do we go? But as I said, friends, of course, it's about taking action, isn't it? You can listen to this, but if it doesn't change our behavior, kind of, what's the point? So purpose, unpack changes in dentistry impacting patient numbers. Hopefully you feel I've done that. Identify simple changes practice can make today. We went through a number of those conversion things you can do. And then I've told you about a chance to get a roadmap for 20% growth in the next 12 months. Because if I came into each of your practices individually, like unless you've been open for 5 minutes, I'm very confident that that's there. Friends, you don't have a lead problem, you have a conversion problem. My name is Angus Pryor. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. All right, let me take some questions. I'll see what questions are coming through. If you're interested in getting one of those, as I said, unfortunately, there's only 3 of them in July. Otherwise, it just means you got to wait. Just any questions on the stuff that I've covered, and then we'll let you go. We've still got a few minutes left before time is up. Okay, I've got a question about conversions on the phone. Let's have a look. I might take you back to the slides. This is the Feral, no, it's not Feral Cheryl, it's the one after that one. Yeah, okay. All right, build rapport. I think we all know that. Use people's name. Like, ask for their name and then use it twice in the first 10 seconds. So they will say, I'll say, oh, sorry, could I get your name, please? And they'll say, oh, it's John. Say their name straight away. Okay, John, great. Now tell me, John, and you don't know what they've asked. Maybe they've said, how much do you charge for a crown? Whatever. You don't have to answer that question straight away. You say, no worries. So you say their name as soon as they say it. Okay, it'll just help get it in here. And then you try to say it again in the first 10 seconds. Well, look, thanks for calling, John. Before I answer that question, just tell me, like, what's going on? What's caused you to call today? And then that's your using their name and building rapport, showing empathy. And then giving patient a reason to choose you. Here's a secret. Unless they're asking for something that's really out there from a dental point of view, guess what? You can fix it because you're a dental practice. And so you just need to reassure people. It's like you can say to them, well, look, John, the great news is you've called the right place because Dr. Angus is an expert at fixing that, or Dr. Angus has got lots of experience fixing people just like you. You know why? Because Dr. Angus is a dentist. Like, you're just trying to reassure people. Let me just pause for a second. If you think you've got a terrible dental practice, well, that's another matter. But I've never met anyone who thought that they were working at a terrible dental practice. But you've just got to reassure people. Good news, John, you've called the right place because Dr. Mary or whatever, she's very experienced at helping people with exactly the situation that you've got, getting them out of pain. I assume that's what's important to you. And he's going, yeah. Give them a reason to choose you. And then for ask the appointment, it's kind of like, why don't we get you booked in to see Dr. Mary? Do you prefer a morning or an afternoon? And maybe they're asking all these questions. Why don't we get you booked in to see Dr. Mary to find out exactly what the best solution is for you? Do you prefer morning or afternoon? Now, I'm not saying you're going to get every single patient across the line with this, but I've got to be honest with you. I've listened to so many recordings. There wouldn't be, I don't think there would be 5% of dentists in Australia who are doing these three things. And as I say to you, I'm not blaming practices, because 20 or 30 years ago, you didn't need to do any of this stuff. There weren't that many dentists around. Patients were just expecting, oh, just call them up and just deal with it. But with so much extra competition, we've got to have a much more patient-centric practice than one that just focuses on, the dentist's needs. All right, what other questions have we got? Okay, someone's asked about this Practice Uplift plan. What's in it? How does it work? Let me see if I can just show you the answers there. All right, so what happens is we'll get you to fill in a survey. It takes about 10 minutes. That helps. We then do a whole bunch of research based on your practice. And then the third thing is we're comparing it against industry benchmarks, and we've got a bunch of intellectual property in this space. And what you get is a written report. It's about 6 pages. It'll be very specific for you at your practice, what you need to do. As it said, it's a custom plan for 20% growth in the next 12 months. It's not, just want to be clear, this is not another marketing plan. It's about we don't want you to waste the next 12 months trying to fix the wrong problem. So yeah, you'll fill in this survey. We'll do a whole bunch of research, then we plug it into our industry benchmarks, our own intellectual property. We produce a report, and then we'll spend about 45 minutes on a Zoom call. We'll go through it with you, and then you get a physical report at the end of it. And then per our guarantee, if you look at it and you go, honestly, I don't think this was very valuable, then you get a full refund. Like you've invested 15 minutes to fill in the survey and then some time on Zoom. So that's kind of the deal. But as I said, unfortunately, I look at these all myself. I just recognize this problem. This is, we've had very strong feedback. While I'm just looking for the next question, we're almost done. I had a dentist say something to me that really stuck with me. I was taking him through his Practice Uplift plan, and he was talking about a treatment plan that he'd done for a patient that was a $15,000 treatment plan. And he said to me, the next time I heard about that patient was a request for patient records from another practice. So there's a perfect example of where, there's those 6 growth blockers. And it was pretty obvious to me that at that practice, they had a big growth blocker, and I just can't remember. It was either around patient communication. Like literally a $15,000 treatment plan, crickets from the patient. The next thing he hears is, can you please transfer the patient records to this new practice who was going to get that work instead of your practice? That's why it's so important to figure out what the right one is. All right, we've got 2 minutes left. Anything else? I don't know whether any of you either. Yes, okay, sure. There's Stuck Practice Roadshow. As I said, for most of you, you're in the metropolitan area. But if you're in regional, it's time to get a bit of love. Yeah, there it is. There. Oops. And then we'll just say thank you to Dental for Web, and then off we go. So yes, that's that one. This is a free event. You'll get a copy of my book, believe it or not. I'll even sign it for you. And I've got a keynote for about 40 minutes, and it's free food and drink. And then there's a bunch of trade displays and door prizes and all this stuff. But, if you're going, oh, boo-hoo, I'm in Sydney or Melbourne, how come you don't get us? Because you guys get this stuff all the time, but for the regional people, not. Well, I think that's everything. Once again, a big thank you to Centaur and Dental for Web for sponsoring this. Really appreciate their support. The next one's in 2 weeks' time. We'll start to unpack the big 6, the next parts of it. Otherwise, I really appreciate your time. Any final questions? Thanks so much, guys. See you later.